Hi everybody, it's Cheryl with Silver Sage Studio, and today I want to do a different kind of video. Last week I did a video on making a sympathy card, and it got me to thinking about how a lot of people struggle with what to say in a sympathy card. And so I thought I would do just a quick video with some tips on what to say in a sympathy card, as well as a couple other tips on things to do when somebody you know has lost a loved one. When we have a friend who's lost a loved one, it can be difficult. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. We want to be supportive. We want to be comforting. But sometimes our fear can act as paralysis, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we're available for the person who's lost a loved one. The tips I'm sharing today come from my own experience of having lost family members. I talked to some other people as well about their experiences, and I did a little bit of research. I found a few different blog posts that I thought were really helpful, so I'm going to link to them in the show notes. I hope you check them out. My first tip has to do with how do you start a sympathy card? Well, it's a good idea to start with a more general note of condolences. You might say something like, "We were so sorry to hear about your loss. We are sending our condolences." Or, "We were so sad to hear about your sister. We want you to know you're in our thoughts." And then you can move on to something more specific. I think it's good then, tip number 2, to go into a story. When we tell a story of the person who has passed away, the message that we send to their family member is that that person lives on in our hearts and is not forgotten. And that can be very comforting. It doesn't have to be an absolutely hilarious story. It can be something as simple as, "I remember talking to your dad at the gym over a cup of coffee after we had both worked out, and he always wanted to talk about the news and what was happening overseas." Or, "I remember how your mom talked to me about engineering and whether or not it was a good career fit for me, and I was so grateful for her input and feedback." If you didn't know the person well enough to tell a full story, you might just give qualities of the person who's passed away. "I really remember the smell of your mom's perfume. It was always such a beautiful smell." Or, "I remember how your brother used to always make us laugh when we would come over for sleepovers." Anything like that lets the person know that we remember their loved one and have not forgotten. And you're not really sure what to say, it can be really helpful to go research a quote and add a quote into the card. So I link down below to a couple websites that have quotes, and they organize them by religious and non-religious quotes. Here were a couple I found that I really liked. This is by Helen Keller. "What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us." And this one is more religious. It's from Matthew 5:4. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." When you give a quote like this, it can be good to expand on it a little bit and just take the quote and connect it to the person's individual situation. You might just say something as simple as, "May your dad's memories be some comfort for you in this time of sorrow." And that connects the quote to their individual situation. My next tip is to send a card and then send again. So what do I mean by that? Well, often what happens when we've lost a loved one is that immediately everybody comes out of the woodwork and surrounds us and supports us. And then after a couple of weeks, our friends and extended family, they go back to their lives, and all of a sudden things are quiet. But for the immediate family, there's still a big hole, a big emptiness in their lives. And that's when things can become really hard. So don't forget to send another card. Often what I'll do is send a card right after that's a sympathy card, and then maybe a month or 2 months later, send a thinking of you card. And this goes as well for invitations. Invite the person maybe a week after. Do you want to go out for coffee? Do you want to go out for dinner? And then don't forget to continue to send invitations. Even if you're getting lots of no's, that's okay. Just knowing that the door is open for them can be comforting. Tip number 5 is to be careful with religious sentiment. If you know the person you're sending the card to has the same religious beliefs as you, then by all means, feel free to be religious in what you have to say. If you don't know that they are religious, then, or that they hold the same religious beliefs as you, just keep maybe those thoughts out and be more general and generic. Remember, this is about the recipient and not about the person that's sending the card. Tip number 6 has to do with offering help. It's not unusual for somebody to offer help when another person has lost a loved one. What's really important is to be specific. When we say, hey, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call me, it's a really kind, thoughtful gesture. But what happens is that it puts the ball in their court to try to figure out what you can do to be helpful. You might say something like, I would be happy to bring food to the funeral reception, or clean your house, or do a grocery store run. If you're really specific about some tasks that you have in mind, it makes it much easier for them to take you up on your offer. This might sound a little silly, but when my dad passed away, my cousin offered to take my mom's car and get it washed. And this was great for my mom because she had all these people coming into town and they were staying at her house and they were using her car to go get things and to run errands. And my mom, with my dad having been sick, hadn't had time to keep her car clean. So having her car cleaned by my cousin really made things a lot easier on my mom. My next tip has to do with things that we sometimes say that are well-intended, but that can also feel a little dismissive. I'd be really careful about saying things like it's all in God's plan, or this is all part of a bigger plan, because when we say those things, I know they're well-intended and they are meant to provide some comfort and some love to the person who's receiving them. Unfortunately, sometimes it can feel like it's dismissive of the grief the person is feeling. Those thoughts might be better held off for a while before you say them. Tip number 9 is to remember that face-to-face connections are really lovely. Cards are really great to send, but having somebody be there in the room with you can feel so comforting and so helpful. And my next tip has to do with that is if you do want to try to reach out and connect with somebody face-to-face, ask them first. Don't just show up at their house. You might send them a text or phone call and say, hey, are you up for some company? And if they say no, don't take it personally. Even if they say no to you, but yes to somebody else, just let it go. Remember, this isn't about us, it's about the person that we're trying to comfort. Tip number 11 is just be okay with being uncomfortable. It can be awkward to sit in a room with somebody who is grieving. They might be angry, they might be feeling deep grief and crying a lot. They might want to tell you the story of what happened when their family member, their loved one passed away. And that can be uncomfortable sometimes. And just be okay with being uncomfortable. You don't have to have the right thing to say. Just being there and loving them is okay. That's what they need. And my last tip is to remember important dates, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. All of those can be especially hard for somebody who's lost a loved one. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask them if they want to go out for coffee, go to dinner, go for a walk, or if they're not near you, send them another card and say, I'm thinking of you on this day that very well might be a day of memory for you. I hope that these tips were useful for you. If you feel so inclined, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel.